47 listings. 3 sold today. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the final pieces of my marriage disappear into a digital shopping cart. The bluish glow of my laptop screen reflected back onto my face. Only the hum of the refrigerator broke the quiet. My phone sat propped against a glass salt shaker next to the keyboard. My right thumb hovered a fraction of an inch over the play button on the security camera app. My hand trembled just enough to cast a shifting shadow on the screen. The printed spreadsheet spread out across the cold wood of the table. 12 pages, stapled at the corner. Half the rows in the gift column were highlighted in blinding fluorescent yellow ink. Every yellow line meant something was stolen. I scrolled down the page on the laptop. A Le Creuset Dutch oven in cerise red. $45. The KitchenAid stand mixer my college roommates chipped in to buy us. $120. A pair of textured throw pillows from Pottery Barn. $25. A Waterford crystal vase. $60. Every single item listed was a wedding gift, and every single post originated from a Facebook account with a generic stock photo of a beach and the name Marie Landry. My left hand rested flat against my stomach. 14 weeks. The baby was the size of a lemon. I checked the app this morning while standing barefoot on cold bathroom tiles, dark circles under my eyes, wondering how long I could keep pretending. I looked back at my phone. The camera app showed a frozen frame of my living room. A woman I had never seen was sitting on my sofa. Her feet rested casually on my coffee table. She held the television remote in her hand. She looked comfortable, at home. I opened the front door camera log and started scrolling backward. I counted the entries out loud, my voice a dry whisper in the empty kitchen. 8:47 in the morning. Old 9, 12, 8:55. 14 separate days in the last 5 weeks. Her visits averaged 3 hours and 20 minutes. The door was always unlocked after I drove away to the elementary school where I teach second grade. The deadbolt would click shut right before the bell rang for dismissal. The answer was on our joint credit card statement. Kyle copied his key at a Minute Key kiosk inside the Lowe hardware store on November 3rd. $3.98. The cost of handing a stranger a key to your wife's home. I looked down at the spreadsheet again. Column F read, location in-house. I built this document to write thank you notes to our wedding guests. The people who bought these things had stood up in a church and cheered when we kissed. They hugged me. They wrote checks they probably could not afford. Now their generosity sat on a local marketplace board priced to move fast by a woman named Marie Landry. I ran my fingers over the dry printer paper. A weight settled behind my ribs. Not triumph, just exhaustion. I had the proof and everything I needed, but the columns had to balance before I could sleep. Headlights swept across the kitchen blinds, casting moving stripes of yellow on the walls. A car door shut in the parking lot. Keys jingled down the exterior hallway. The front door opened, and Kyle walked in. He dropped his keyring on the counter with a loud clatter that made me flinch. Hey, babe. Sorry I am late. The client dinner ran way longer than I expected. He looked over and saw the laptop glowing. What are you looking at in the dark? I reached out and pushed the laptop lid down. The kitchen plunged into deeper shadow. Thank you notes. I am falling behind on them. He walked over and kissed the top of my head. He smelled like grilled steak and expensive red wine. You and your spreadsheets. Have you eaten yet? I can order something from that Thai place you like. I am okay, I said. Are you sure you need to eat for 2 now? I do not want you getting dizzy. I ate earlier. You go ahead and take your shower. He hesitated for a second, then shrugged. All right. Do not stay up too late. He disappeared down the hall. The bathroom door clicked shut. The shower water turned on, hissing through the pipes. I opened the laptop again. 47 listings. 3 sold today. I opened a new browser tab and typed the words, Divorce Attorney, Raleigh Free Consultation. 6 weeks earlier, Kyle sat across from me at this exact table and told me a story he called The Truth. We were eating Chinese takeout. Saturday night. We had been married exactly 3 months. I was 8 weeks pregnant. We found out 2 weeks prior, and he had spent those 14 days buying baby books and talking about college funds. I was 27 years old, a second-grade teacher who had just moved from Durham to Raleigh because Kyle got a promotion in medical device sales. My life looked on track. Everything looked safe. His carton of lo mein was pushed aside. Fidgeting had consumed him all evening. Chopsticks tapped against the table. An Apple Watch was checked constantly. Reaching across the table, he took my hand. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you react." I put down my chopstick. The soy sauce pooled around the edge of my container. "Okay. Do not be jealous. Okay, I need you to hear this and not be jealous." He squeezed my hand tightly. "Before we got married, I am talking about before, not after. I slept with Becca one last time." I stared at him. The refrigerator hummed. "One last time," he repeated. "I know that is hard to hear, but I am telling you because I respect you. Most guys would not say anything at all." "Before the wedding," I said. "It was before. It is done. She is gone. You are the one I chose." I kept my hand very still under his fingers. The plastic chopstick rested on the table. A drop of condensation rolled down the side of my water glass. I noticed the rhythm of his breathing. He had rehearsed this. The pauses landed in the wrong places too, even too measured, like a man reciting a speech he practiced in the car on the way home. He said before we got married, but we had been married for 3 months. Why was he telling me this tonight? Why drop this confession when I was 8 weeks pregnant, and morning sickness made it hard to stand up? Leaving was hardest right now. He chose the moment when I had the least room to walk away. My mother always told me to keep my head down and be grateful. I was trying. I searched his face for guilt, but found only a smooth and practiced sincerity. "All right," I said. He blinked. His grip loosened slightly. All right. Thank you for telling me." Kyle exhaled a long breath. A bright smile broke across his face. He pulled my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. "I love you. That is why I told you. We have a clean slate now." He leaned in close. I caught the scent of his cologne. It was not his usual Acqua di Gio, but something sharper, woodsy, and new, filed away. We finished eating in silence. I pushed my rice around the carton. "Kyle," I said, "I have been feeling like things in the apartment get moved while I am at school. The throw pillow was on the wrong end of the sofa yesterday. There was a coffee mug in the sink that I did not use." He laughed softly and shook his head. "Babe, you are pregnant. Pregnancy brain is a real thing. Do you want me to get a camera for the porch? Package thefts have been crazy in this complex." "Actually, yes. That would make me feel better." He promised to order a Ring doorbell that weekend. He never did, just like he never ordered the thank you cards. The next morning I bought a $30 Wise indoor camera online. I said nothing about it to him. Wednesday, week 1. Lunch break. The second graders were at recess, and I sat at my desk grading papers, an apple juice box sweating beside my phone. Coffee made me sick now. Through the window, the distant shrieks of children on the playground. My phone buzzed against the wood veneer of the desk. Wise motion alert. 11:23 in the morning. I dimmed the screen and cupped my hand around the phone, holding it close to my chest like a secret. The wall clock above the whiteboard ticked steady and loud while I opened the app. The live feed buffered for an agonizing second before snapping into sharp resolution. It showed my apartment living room. The front door swung open. A woman walked inside. She had blonde highlights framing her face. She wore dark Tory birch flats. She did not knock. She did not hesitate at the threshold. She had a key. She walked into my home the way a person walks into their own house after a long day. I sat frozen in my desk chair. On the screen, she dropped her leather bag on my kitchen counter. My counter. She opened my refrigerator, poured herself a glass of my oat milk, walked to my sofa, kicked off her shoes, pulled my throw blanket over her legs, and picked up the remote. I watched for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That is how long it takes to fully understand that your husband gave someone else a physical key to your sanctuary. She had been coming here while I stood in this room teaching little children how to spell simple words like because and friend and family. The throw pillow really was in the wrong place yesterday. The coffee mug in the sink really was not mine. Pregnancy brain was a lie. Kyle knew the whole time. Kyle gave her the key. I placed the phone face down on the spelling tests. Picked up my red pen. Steady hand. A boy named Liam had spelled because as Becuz. I circled it and wrote the correction in the margin. I did not cry. I did not shake. I graded 11 more tests before the bell rang and the children flooded back into the hallway. I drove home at 4. The apartment was empty, but the evidence was everywhere. The oat milk carton sat lower on the shelf. The throw blanket was folded in a trifold. I always folded it in half. Always. The Wise playback showed the woman left at 2:14. 5 hours in my home. I sat down on the sofa cushion. Was the fabric still warm? No, too much time had passed. But the indentation was real, someone else's weight pressed into the spot where I sat to grade papers every night. I opened the spreadsheet and checked column F against the apartment. The Dutch oven was still in the cabinet above the fridge, the KitchenAid on the counter, the crystal vase on the bookshelf. Nothing missing yet. I saved the file and closed the lid. I would check again tomorrow. Kyle walked through the door at 6:30. He loosened his silk tie and smiled at me. He looked like the man I married. "How was your day, babe?" he asked, dropping his briefcase by the door. "Good," I said. "Quiet. That is good. You need the rest." I walked into the kitchen to start making dinner. We sat at the small dining table and ate. He talked about his sales quotas for the month. I chewed my food and swallowed. I looked at the man sitting across from me and I started counting. This was day 1. Saturday morning arrived with the heavy humidity typical of early fall in North Carolina. It was week 2 of my counting. I stood in the kitchen making breakfast while Kyle slept in. The smell of melting butter and toasting bread filled the small space. I turned off the burner and reached up to the high cabinet above the refrigerator. I was looking for the heavy red Dutch oven my grandmother had given us. My hand met empty air. I dragged a wooden dining chair over to the counter and climbed up. The shelf was bare. A faint ring of dust outlined where the pot used to sit. I climbed down from the chair. My bare feet hit the cold floor. I walked into the living room, opened my laptop, and clicked on the spreadsheet. The location column clearly stated the red pot belonged in the cabinet above the fridge. I had verified it just 5 days ago. I picked up my phone and opened the security camera application. I pulled up the playback log for Thursday. At 10:41 in the morning, the front door unlocked. Becca walked inside carrying nothing but a small purse. I fast-forwarded the video. At 11:23, she walked back out the front door. She was carrying a large, dark, reusable shopping bag. The bag was heavy. I watched her pause in the doorway and adjust her grip using both hands to haul it over the threshold. I opened a new browser tab and went to the local marketplace website. I typed the brand of the pot into the search bar. The third result down caught my eye. It was listed by an account named Marie Landry with a profile picture of an empty beach. A cerise red Dutch oven, barely used. A wedding gift, listed for $45. The post went live on Thursday at 3 in the afternoon, exactly 4 hours after Becca carried that heavy bag out of my front door. $350 from my grandmother, traded for $45 by a stranger. My grandmother drove 2 hours to the bridal shower with walking pneumonia because she refused to miss it. She sat in a corner chair and coughed into a lace handkerchief just to watch me unwrap that heavy red box. And now it was a marketplace listing. I sat at the table and let the math settle in my head. I opened the spreadsheet document and created a new column titled Status. Next to the Dutch oven, I typed the word missing and noted the sale price. Then I stood up and started walking through the apartment room by room. I opened every closet, checked every drawer, and looked under the bed. The stainless steel coffee maker from Kyle's college roommate was gone. The textured throw pillows from my coworkers were missing. The expensive duvet cover we received from my aunt was nowhere to be found. 4 items missing. 4 marketplace listings under the name Marie Landry. I sat back down at the computer. I added columns for the date listed and whether the item had sold. Not a word to Kyle when he woke up. I poured him a cup of coffee and smiled. 3 days later, I stayed late at the elementary school. Tuesday evening, the classroom was dark, except for my desk lamp. The building smelled faintly of floor wax and pencil shavings. I had been tracking the Marie Landry account for a full week. 15 items had been sold. The total revenue sat somewhere around $620. I opened a new tab and searched the name Marie Landry on a popular mobile payment application. Nothing came up. I tried searching the last name Landis in the Raleigh area. One result populated: Becca Landis. Her transaction history was set to partially public. I logged into Kyle's payment account using the password he never bothered to change from when we were dating. I scrolled down his history. Every Friday, a transfer went out for $200. The receiving account was private, identified only by a small sunflower picture. But the transfers started months before our wedding day. I was holding a red pen. Without realizing it, I had started writing dollar amounts in the blank margins of a second grader's spelling worksheet. 200, 600, 45. I caught myself staring at the numbers scrawled in my own teacher handwriting, documenting the financial collapse of my marriage in the margins of a 7-year-old's homework. I tore the margin off the worksheet, folded the strip of paper, and slid it into my pocket. I took screenshots of the marketplace listings, the payment transfers, the camera footage. All of it went into a cloud folder named Thank You Notes Draft. Thursday afternoon brought a suffocating heat. I sat in my car in the school parking lot with the engine turned off and the windows rolled up. The lot was slowly emptying as the other teachers drove home. The seatbelt cut across my stomach, so I gently pushed the fabric down below the small bump. My phone started ringing. The screen displayed an unknown number from Charlotte. I almost ignored it. But I had been waiting for something to break open, and the silence in the car was becoming too loud. I answered the call. A voice spoke immediately. "Taylor, this is Tara, Kyle's older sister. We met at the rehearsal dinner. I sat at the back table because my mother put me there. I remember I said, I am going to say something, and it is going to sound like I am being dramatic because that is what my family always calls me. But I need you to hear it." I gripped the steering wheel even though I was not driving, just holding on. "Go ahead." Tara spoke quickly, her voice carrying a sharp and jagged edge. She told me about a woman named Lacey Cho. Lacey was Kyle's girlfriend for 2 years before he met me. Tara explained the pattern. Kyle moved Lacey to a new city, isolated her from her friends, and started seeing Becca on the side. The same Becca. This was not a new affair. And then Tara said Kyle sat Lacey down and delivered a confession. He told her he slept with Becca one last time before they were official, Tara said. He told Lacey he was sharing it because he respected her. I stopped breathing. He used those exact words. I have the screenshots of their text messages, Tara said. Lacey sent them to me after they finally broke up. I kept them because I knew this would happen again. I stared out the windshield. A parent walked past the front of my car holding a small child by the hand. The parent waved at me. I raised my hand and waved back. Everything outside the glass looked normal. Inside the car, the ground was shifting. Tara kept talking, her voice tight, with years of frustration. She explained that the confession was a playbook. Kyle designed it to make the woman feel like the worst part was already over, a preemptive strike against intuition. Once he confessed a small version of the truth, any future suspicion would crash against the wall of that confession. She already processed it. She already forgave him. If something felt wrong after that, she would talk herself out of it. Tara, why are you telling me this right now? I asked. Because my mother called me last Sunday, Tara replied. She said Kyle told you about Becca and you took it so well. She was proud of you. She said you were so mature, not like Lacey. And that is when it hit me. My mother knows. She knows he does this and she is happy you did not put up a fight. I closed my eyes. My mother-in-law at the rehearsal dinner squeezing my hands, telling me how lucky her son was. She knew. She welcomed me into the family because I was quiet, because I was compliant, because I would be easier to manage than the last one. Can you send me those screenshots? I asked. They are already in your messages, she said. I used a secondary application because Kyle does not check my social media. I opened the application on my phone. A folder sat waiting for me. 23 images. I clicked through them, message after message from 4 years ago. The same words, the same reassurances, the same instruction to not be jealous. Monday of week 4, I sat across from a family law attorney named Robin Prescott in downtown Raleigh. She reviewed my spreadsheet, my photographs, and my camera footage. Then she laid out my options. I could file for a divorce from bed and board on fault grounds of adultery. It would not end the marriage immediately, but it would establish guilt trigger, equitable distribution, and bar Kyle from ever claiming spousal support. I could sue Becca directly under the state's alienation of affection law. The stolen wedding gifts were marital property, and selling them without my consent constituted dissipation of assets. The court would credit me the full value. And the camera footage was legal. One-party consent state my own home. I walked out onto the sidewalk with afternoon sun on my face and a plan locked in my bag. A lawyer, an airtight folder of evidence, and Tara at my back. My chest expanded with something close to power. The sidewalk was crowded with people who had no idea what I was carrying: a spreadsheet, camera footage, screenshots, receipts. Everything looked figured out. The worst part looked over. I was wrong about that last part. Kyle started noticing a change in the air between us during the 4th week. He could not put his finger on it, but he definitely felt the shift. I stopped resting my hand on his shoulder when I walked past his chair at the kitchen table. I stopped asking him about his daily sales meetings. I was simply quieter, moving through the apartment with the careful and deliberate precision of a ghost. His response was a flood of attention. Saturday afternoon, he surprised me with a trip to a baby store. We walked down wide aisles, packed under harsh fluorescent lights. He pulled a shopping cart while I trailed behind. He stopped in front of a modern white crib and ran his hand over the smooth painted wood. The display tag read, Babyletto Hudson, $400. He reached out and touched my stomach right there in the middle of the store aisle, smiling at me with the full wattage of a man who sells medical equipment for a living. Our kid is going to have the absolute best room, he said. We bought the crib. On the drive back to the apartment, he kept reaching over the center console to squeeze my knee. I have been thinking, Kyle said, keeping his eyes on the road. I want to paint the second bedroom this weekend. A soft yellow. Keep it gender neutral. What do you think? I looked out the passenger window at the passing pine trees. That sounds nice. And what about houses? He continued, voice bright and rehearsed. Something in the suburbs. A yard. A real place for a family. Okay, that is it. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. I am just tired today. He was performing. The excitement, the plans, the constant touching. Same calculated energy as the confession. He sensed a crack in his double life and was pouring concrete over it. The $400 crib sat in the back of his car. That morning, my spreadsheet showed $1,847 in sold wedding gifts. He was buying our baby a bed with stolen generosity. I smiled at him. I had finally learned how to smile properly. I learned the technique from watching my mother over the years. She smiled at our landlord when the rent was 3 days late. She smiled at the parent-teacher conferences when my teachers told her I was too quiet. You just pull the corners of your mouth up, you count your breaths, and you wait. The following Tuesday, I came home from school at my usual time. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The apartment smelled different. The door to the second bedroom stood wide open at the end of the hallway. We had painted it together just 2 days ago. We laughed while we worked. I held the paint roller with both hands, and Kyle teased me, saying I looked like one of my second graders trying to reach the top of the chalkboard. That was a real moment, or at least it looked like one. I walked down the hall and stopped in the doorway of the nursery. The faint chemical smell of fresh yellow paint hung in the warm air. The white crib stood against the far wall. Kyle built it Sunday while I sat cross-legged on the floor reading the instructions out loud, step by step. I reached into my canvas bag and pulled out my phone. I opened the security application and checked the daily log. There was an entry from 10:14 that morning. I stood in the doorway of the physical room while watching the digital recording of that exact same space. The screen showed Becca walking into the living room. Kyle was right behind her. He gave her a walking tour of my apartment like a real estate agent showing a new property. They walked through the kitchen. He pointed out the cabinets. Then they moved down the hallway and stepped into the nursery. Becca walked up to the white crib. She reached out and rested her hand flat against the top rail. Kyle stood directly behind her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "It is a cute room," Becca said. Her voice echoed slightly on the recording. "Taylor picked the color," Kyle replied. He put his hands in his pockets. "I would have done gray." Becca ran her fingers along the smooth white wood. "When is she due, May?" Kyle said. He stepped a fraction of an inch closer to her. "Listen, after everything settles, this could be your office, or whatever you want it to be." I tapped the screen and paused the video. I rewound the footage by 10 seconds. I pressed play again. The tiny speaker repeated his words. "After everything settles, this could be your office." I had understood the affair. I had understood the stolen gifts and the payment transfers and the copied key. I had processed the scripted confession and filed it into neat columns and rows. I treated my ruined marriage like a math problem. But this was not a spreadsheet. This was the room for my baby. This was the crib we built together. These were the yellow walls I rolled paint onto until my shoulders ached. And my husband was standing right here showing the room to the woman who wore my bathrobe and drank my milk, and he was offering it to her. After everything settles. Those 4 words meant after I was gone. They meant I was just a temporary placeholder occupying space in my own life. My legs gave out. I sank down onto the carpeted floor of the nursery. The phone rested in my lap. The paused video showed Becca with her hand on the crib. I crawled forward. I reached up and placed my hand on the exact same spot on the wooden rail. The wood was cold. I pressed my palm against it and closed my eyes. Deep in my stomach, something fluttered. Not a kick yet, a tiny bubble popping underwater. I sat on the floor and focused on my breathing. No tears came. Instead, I started counting again. 14 days of camera footage. 47 online marketplace listings, 23 text message screenshots from Tara, $1,847 in sold gifts, $3,200 sent to Becca to pay her rent, 1 house key copied at a hardware store, 1 heavily rehearsed confession delivered while squeezing my hand, and 1 single sentence promising my baby's room to another woman. For weeks, the only plan was destruction. Set up a projector at Thanksgiving, play the footage for his whole family, watch him burn. But sitting on the nursery floor with my hand on the crib and that tiny flutter in my stomach, the anger shifted. The heat vanished. What replaced it was cold and clear. Destroying him was reactive. Building something he could never reach was the actual victory. A life for this child that did not include a father who promised nurseries to his girlfriend. The evidence was not a weapon. It was a key to unlock the door and walk through it. I stood up. I wiped my sweating palms on the denim of my jeans. I picked up my phone and opened my messages. I typed a text to Tara. I am ready. I need your help with one more thing. I put the phone in my pocket, walked out, and drove to a parking lot. The sun was going down. Overhead lights buzzed to life, casting orange light over the pavement. Engine off. Windows up. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, Mom," I said. My voice sounded hollow in the quiet car. "I need to tell you something." Silence. My mother had waited tables for 30 years. She could read a voice like a menu. How bad? Bad. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes. I am in my car." "Is the baby okay?" "The baby is okay." "Then tell me everything." I started at the beginning and told her everything. The confession, the camera, Becca walking through the front door, the gifts disappearing one by one onto Marketplace, Tara's call, the nursery footage. I laid it out in chronological order, the same measured way I explain a lesson plan to my students, because it was the only way to get the words out without my throat closing shut. My mother listened without interrupting. When I finished, the line stayed quiet for a long minute. I could hear her steady breathing on the other end. "Your grandmother gave you that red Dutch oven, Taylor," she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. "She gave it to you at the bridal shower. She had pneumonia, and she still came." "I know, Mom. He sold your grandmother's Dutch oven. He had Becca sell it online for $45. My mother exhaled heavily into the receiver. "I want you to listen to me very carefully. I spent 30 years of my life smiling at people who treated me poorly. I worked double shifts and told you everything was going to be fine when it was not fine at all. I taught you to make yourself small. I taught you to keep your head down and be grateful for whatever scraps people offered. I was wrong to do that, Taylor. I was wrong about all of it." I gripped the steering wheel with my free hand. "You have a lawyer retained?" my mother asked. "Yes." "You have the evidence secured?" "Yes, all of it." "Then you do not need my advice on what to do next," she said. "You just need to know that I am right here." I leaned my forehead against the cold side window. The buzzing of the parking lot lights seemed to grow louder in my ears. The knot in my chest started to loosen. "Mom," I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Can I come home if I need to, baby?" she said softly. "You could have come home any day of the last 3 months. Your bedroom has been ready since the day you moved to Raleigh. I knew you would need it. I just did not know when." Monday of week 6. Robin Prescott's office. I signed my name to a stack of legal documents. Divorce from bed and board, fault grounds of adultery under North Carolina state law. The filing activated an automatic restraining order on our marital assets. Kyle could no longer sell, transfer, or hide a single dollar without facing a judge. A separate process server picked up the alienation of affection complaint headed for Becca's pharmaceutical sales office. I drove back to the Raleigh apartment while Kyle was at work. I packed a single suitcase with my clothes, my laptop, my printed master spreadsheet, and my important documents. I loaded the bags into the trunk of my car and drove straight to my mother in Fayetteville. I left the apartment looking untouched. Kyle would find out when I decided to tell him. On Wednesday, I called my school principal and requested a personal day for Friday. Then I called Tara. "I am hosting a dinner on Friday night," I told her. "Kyle and his parents will be there. He thinks it is a special announcement about the nursery." Tara paused on the other end of the line. "What are you actually announcing?" "The truth," I said. Friday evening, I stood in the kitchen making chicken piccata, Kyle's favorite. The sharp smell of lemon juice and capers filled the apartment. 4 plates, 4 glasses, cloth napkins folded beside each setting. Kyle agreed to invite Tara after I told him we should start fresh for the baby. He hesitated at first, but the idea of me playing peacemaker between him and his estranged sister felt like a win. He told me how mature I was being. Lynette arrived first. She walked through the front door and pulled me into a tight hug. She smelled like heavy floral perfume and hairspray. Her nails were freshly painted, and she wore the pearl earrings she wore to every family event. "You look radiant," my mother-in-law said, stepping back to study my face. "Pregnancy really suits you, sweetheart." She handed me a small pastel envelope. It contained a greeting card and a crisp $50 bill meant for the nursery decorations. I thanked her and placed it on the counter beside the stove. Tara arrived 10 minutes later. Kyle stiffened the moment she walked into the room. His jaw tightened and his shoulders pulled back slightly, the way a man braces for something he does not want to deal with. Tara ignored his posture. She walked straight to me and hugged me tightly, pressing her cheek against mine for an extra beat. Then she turned and gave her brother a brief, polite embrace. We sat down to eat. My hands were steady. I asked Kyle about work, asked Lynette about her garden, passed the salad. Ordinary dinner. Except for the laptop sitting closed at the empty fifth place setting. Kyle kept eyeing the silver casing of the computer while he chewed his chicken. Finally, he pointed his fork at it. "What is the laptop doing on the table? It is for dessert," I said. I waited until every plate was cleared. Kyle poured a fresh glass of red wine for his mother. I drank ice water. Tara sat with her hands folded. No music, no television. Just the refrigerator hum and 4 people breathing. I reached out and opened the laptop. The hinge clicked loudly in the silent room. "Kyle," I said. My voice was steady and even. "Do you remember what you told me 6 weeks ago while we were sitting at this exact table?" Kyle stopped with his wine glass hovering halfway to his mouth. He set it back down on the coaster very carefully. "Yes, I do. You told me that you slept with Becca one last time before we got married. You told me not to be jealous. You told me it was done." "It is done, Taylor," he said, his voice taking on that familiar, condescending tone. "We already talked about this." "Right, we talked about it." I turned the laptop around so the screen faced him directly. The security application loaded with a spinning blue wheel. Then the thumbnail image populated. It was a still frame. Becca was sitting on my living room sofa. Her feet were resting on the coffee table. The remote control was in her hand. The digital timestamp glowed brightly in the bottom corner. It read, "Last Tuesday at 11:47 in the morning." Kyle froze. His mouth opened, closed, and opened again with no sound coming out. He stared at the screen, not at me, not at his mother, just at the image of his mistress, sitting in his home, captured by a camera he never knew was there. Then he screamed. Not a word, a sound from somewhere deep in his chest, raw and guttural. In 1 second, he understood what I had spent 5 weeks building. I had been watching every entry, every exit, every stolen wedding gift carried out the front door every hour. Becca spent inside our home drinking my milk and wearing my bathrobe. The footage had not even played yet. If the thumbnail was this bad, the rest would end him. "Taylor, please, I can explain everything to you," he stammered, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "I have not pressed play yet," I said. I used my teacher voice. The one that stops a classroom cold. No volume, just authority. I reached over and pressed the spacebar. The video started playing. Becca entering the apartment with her copied key. Becca carrying my grandmother's heavy red Dutch oven out the door. Becca scrolling through her phone on my sofa. Becca opening my bedroom closet and running her hands over my hanging dresses. Then the scene cut to the nursery. The yellow room. Kyle and Becca standing together. Kyle placing his hand on the white crib rail. His voice echoed clearly out of the small computer speakers. "After everything settles, this could be your office." Lynette gasped loudly and slapped her hand over her mouth. Kyle snapped his head toward her. "Mom, please." "Do not speak to me," Lynette whispered. Her voice was trembling. She was defending the image of her family, and that image was shattering across the table. I closed the laptop lid. The screen went black. I reached under the table and pulled out the printed spreadsheet. 12 pages. Stapled at the corner, I dropped the thick stack of paper squarely in front of him. 47 of our wedding gifts were sold on a local online marketplace under a fake name, I said. The total retail value was $4,200. You sold them for $1,847. I tracked your payment application. You transferred $3,200 to an account that pays Becca's monthly apartment rent. The receipt for the key you copied at the hardware store is highlighted on page 6. Tara leaned forward. She slid her phone across the smooth wood table toward her brother. The screen displayed her photo gallery. I slept with her one last time before we were official, Tara read aloud. I am telling you because I respect you. Kyle stared at the glowing phone screen. He looked up at his sister. You kept those messages, Lacey kept them, Tara said, her voice hard and unforgiving. I just made the copies. I stood up from my chair. I reached into my canvas tote bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I placed it gently on the table right next to his dinner plate. Those are filing papers for a divorce from bed and board, I said. The fault grounds are adultery. Your attorney will receive the official copies on Monday morning. Becca will be served with a civil lawsuit for the alienation of affection at her office. I turned and looked at Lynette. She was crying silently into her cloth napkin. I know you knew about her. Tara told me the truth. I am not angry at you anymore. I just need you to understand one thing. Your grandchild and I are going to be fine. Without any of this, I picked up my canvas bag. My car was packed and waiting in the parking lot below. I walked to the front door and placed my hand on the brass knob. I turned back one last time to look at the dining table. Kyle was staring at the manila envelope like it was a live explosive. Lynette was crying into her napkin. Tara sat with her arms crossed, watching her brother, the way you watch a building come down. That camera cost $30, Kyle. You should have spent more on your secrets than I spent finding them. I stepped out into the warm evening air and pulled the door shut behind me. I did not slam it. I closed it gently, the way you close a book you have finished. The brass latch clicked into the frame. The sound echoed down the exterior hallway and faded into the parking lot, where my car sat loaded and waiting with the engine cold. I walked across the asphalt and got in. I buckled the seatbelt below my stomach. I turned the key. The headlights cut across the building and swept over the window of the apartment. I would never sleep in again. I pulled out of the parking space and drove south toward Fayetteville. 2 months later, I sat at my mother's kitchen table in Fayetteville. The morning light filtered through the old window glass above the sink, the panes warped just enough to bend the sunlight into soft yellow patterns across the worn countertops. This was the same table where my mother counted tips into a mason jar when I was 9 years old. The same table where I ate cereal before school, where I did my homework. Where I learned that a woman could hold an entire household together with patience and a smile. The light here was softer than the Raleigh apartment. The rich smell of dark roast coffee filled the room. My second trimester nausea had finally passed, and I could enjoy the bitter scent again without feeling sick. My printed spreadsheet sat on the table in front of me. It looked vastly different now. A thick black line crossed through every row except one. The judge granted the divorce from bed and board. Kyle did not contest. His attorney took one look at the camera footage, the financial trail, and Tara's pattern evidence, and told him to settle quietly. The court credited me the full $4,200 in dissipated wedding gifts from Kyle's share. The absolute divorce would follow after the mandatory 1-year separation, but my legal protections were already in place. Primary custody was mine. Child support calculated under the state income shares model. His documented adultery barred him from alimony permanently. The alienation of affection suit against Becca was still pending. Her attorney had called mine 3 times this week, each call more desperate than the last. Becca was panicking. Kyle had lied to her too. He told her I was fine with the arrangement, that we were separating amicably. She had no idea I possessed camera footage of her sitting on my sofa, financial records tracing every dollar and 4 years of pattern evidence from his previous relationship. The lawsuit was tearing them apart from the inside. I looked down at the last remaining row on my spreadsheet. Column A, read hand-knitted baby blanket in cream. Column B, read Gina Pratt. Column C, read priceless. Column D, read thank you note sent. Column E, read yes, delivered in person. The actual blanket sat folded neatly on the table beside the paper. My mother had spent 3 months knitting it. It was never listed on an online marketplace. It never could be. I picked up a pen. The stack of blank stationery cards beside my coffee mug was for a different kind of thank you note this time. Not for wedding gifts. For the people who showed up after the wedding fell apart. I wrote a card to my friends in Durham who drove down to help me move boxes. I wrote one to my school principal who held my teaching position without question while I sat through court hearings. I wrote one to Robin Prescott for taking my case on a payment plan without making me feel small about it. I saved Tara's card for last. I uncapped my pen and pressed the tip to the heavy paper. Thank you for keeping those screenshots for 4 years, I wrote. Thank you for calling me that afternoon. Thank you for sitting at that dining table and holding your ground. I know what it cost you. I folded the heavy cardstock and slid it into a white envelope. I placed it gently on top of the finished stack. The Raleigh lease was never in my name. The health insurance would end, but I had already enrolled in the school district plan. The apartment I never called home was Kyle's problem now. 14 weeks ago, I sat at a different kitchen table, looked at a man who was lying to my face, and quietly said the word, all right. At the time, I simply meant that I would survive the impact. I did not know yet that surviving would look like building complex spreadsheets and reviewing hours of security camera footage. I did not know it would look like sitting in a hot parking lot and asking my mother if I could come back to my childhood bedroom. I did not know it would culminate in a dinner party where I served chicken piccata and then systematically dismantled a liar's entire life. I reached out and picked up the cream-colored baby blanket. I held the soft yarn against my stomach. I was 22 weeks along now. The baby was the size of a papaya. No need to check my phone for anything else. There were no more motion alerts to monitor, no more fake marketplace listings to track, no more hidden footage to review in a dark kitchen at midnight. The small plastic camera was still sitting on the bookshelf in the Raleigh apartment, still quietly recording an empty living room where no one sat on the sofa anymore. But I was not watching it anymore. That chapter was closed and filed away right alongside the spreadsheet and the screenshots and the manila envelope with Kyle's signature at the bottom. I took a deep breath of the morning air. The coffee was warm in my hands. The blanket was soft against my stomach. My mother was humming something in the next room, the same way she hummed when I was a little girl, sitting at this same table with a glass of orange juice and a coloring book. I had my own table now.